Hello. So this isn't the type of vid I usually make. Usually I just, make speed paints and funny little meme vids. But I want to share my experience being groomed with the internet. Just to get it out there. Also, I'm not good with scripts, or even so I will just be using text to speech. So sorry if it sounds weirdly worded. But before I start, I must say that I did a lot of crappy things that led up to this. So, like me being crappy to others is very intertwined with me getting close to him, and to explain how I got in this position. It's best to bring it up because, as I said, being crappy led to my grooming. So let's get started. Also, unfortunately, I don't have much evidence other than what I'm saying, because most of the stuff happened over call. But I will show some evidence near the end. And also, don't be mean to anybody if you manage to find out who they are. So I met him in late 2022. I will simply call him Juan. I met him in this now defunct Discord server for a dead streaming group by a formerly popular animator, who I will call Merlin, because they will be important later. Before I met him, I was friends with these other people who I now feel I didn't treat the best. I would talk over them when they were talking, bring up inappropriate subjects, like Alfred's Playhouse, or personal topics, like their parents, and come off as entitled to their art. That was a miscommunication, but still. Because of these things they left me in early 2023. When they did, it really hurt me. I felt so abandoned and cried in a VC about to Juan. He comforted me, and was there for me as they didn't like him either. He's the only person I've ever cried in a call to, and it made me grow closer to him and even started to call him Tate because he is Filipino and it means father in his language. Sometimes he would share cropped NSFW with me and have inappropriate conversations with me, but had no problem because he would delete the NSFW afterwards, and I found it fun talking to him. I didn't see anything wrong with it even though he was 9 years older than me. He would also make racist jokes here and there, which is why my ex-friends also didn't like him. But I didn't think he actually believed in the things he was saying. Because he did question how racists complain about black people in America, because it wasn't their choice to be here because their ancestors were brought here. I'll get back to this later. Now I had, and still have, an intense obsession with Merlin. Like, I would draw them a lot of fan art, make ox for their thing, make headcanons for their characters, wanting to be friends with them, and say that I wanted a similar hoodie to them. Those last 3 things are what got me in trouble. I got muted. I was told it because of me wanting a similar hoodie and wanting my OC to have one, and headcanoning a very personal character of theirs. When it first happened, I was incredibly shocked and upset. Like I cried in my closet feeling so awful, and I even scratched my arm. After that closet thing, I became incredibly single-minded about the hoodie, and felt like they were just being petty. But I turned out to be wrong. When I eventually emailed them about this, they called me out, telling me stuff like they didn't like my headcanons for their very personal character and characters, and felt that I was ripping them away from them. But like they were okay with headcanons. But I was headcanon characters that haven't even appeared in the comic yet, and one very personal one of theirs, and saying that I had made people in VC uncomfortable. And the stuff I mentioned about me being crappy to mutuals I mentioned earlier, didn't like my venting in the vent chat after I did something bad, and felt like I had a parasocial relationship with them. But they did say some positive things. They did say that could get better and improve from this, and told me to take some time offline. They felt like they had gave me a huge slap on the wrists. I remember when I heard this, I felt so awful. I just remembered constantly venting, especially on my way home from Oklahoma, as I was in Oklahoma at the time of the muting, and the day after getting home, I cut myself. And when I told Juan, he asked to call me to see if I was okay. He comforted me and told me I was a good person. He was so kind to me when I was at a low point. Though other people in the server were somewhat concerned with me. like Merlin's partner, who I will call Gwen, and some other person. Gwen urged me to tell my parents and said all the venting wasn't helping me. And the other person told me that we all make people uncomfortable, and I'm not a bad person. I did tell my parents, and they decided to send me to therapy, which I still am in as of right now. I did email Merlin after this and asked them to explain more on what I had done to make people uncomfortable. They told me what it was I did in more detail, and also told me that they were proud of me for trying to get better and improve. I made a whole email explaining, apologizing for my actions. They told me they're proud of me and told me that it seemed there was miscommunication between the mutuals and me, and said they might come around after some time, but didn't like, after all I've done for you, you mute me because of a hoodie. Comment I made feeling as it was entitled. To be fair, I was not feeling best when I was feeling that. I still had excessive vent posts in the vent chat, which was not healthy for me, and was bad for other people in the server who also needed that chat. There was this one moment that makes me angry sometimes, but I don't know if I should feel entitled to be angry. Like, I had this OC that was a mix of two of Merlin's original species I had made a few months back. I had said I wanted to start working on the OC again. They told me that the two species that made up my OC couldn't reproduce together because they reproduced very differently. And I said, well, fanfictions gets weird. And they didn't like that, and told me that's not what they want me to do with their stories. Now publicly I respected their wishes, but I just felt so upset and hurt by this. Like, I had worked so hard on this OC, and I had felt like I just had it taken away. I remember crying about to Juan, and he comforted me about it. Now, to give more of Merlin's side, I did decide to ask Gwen about this, as I didn't think Merlin was up for an email, and I couldn't DM them on Discord. I asked why they were okay with it before, but not okay with it now. Their explanation was that back then, because we still didn't know how the species came to be. Now that everything was more concrete, it's not possible anymore. I responded to this saying how upset I was because I worked so hard on that character. Their response was that they're sorry, I feel that way, and that the world rules were not concrete, and told me to not take it personally, and that their story was their pride and joy. And then I responded asking why they felt so threatened. And maybe I should have used a better word like overprotective, but you get what I'm getting at. And it made me worry that they might try to take the Ox I made for their O, since they go against the Owl's canon story, which I feel like was also unfounded because I still made those characters. Even if Merlin doesn't want me writing about their O, it would be impossible and unethical to take my Ox away from me. But also felt like, were they doing the same thing to me that they thought I did to them? Like ripping away characters like I did to them. Also weirdly saying that I don't usually stand up to authority figures. Also probably should have used a better word. But again, I was just trying to explain I'm cowardly, and I don't stand up for myself. I just don't confront people, and I just feel bitter about it afterwards. And also it's what I felt about them. Like they enforce rules and I look up to them. And they responded that it doesn't threaten them, but that their world has rules that must be followed. That their O is different because they know the original law, and the original piece of media is made by a big company. They also said that they have other owls that they keep to themselves. And if the law changes, they change it accordingly and respectfully. And that me, on the other hand, has direct contact with them via email and the server. And they see everything I post, and me telling them straight to their face that fanfiction gets weird. After them saying that it isn't possible and there are rules, seemed insulting to them since they were still trying to get the law down, and said I should just wait till everything is written down to make ours and stuff. And they also didn't like how I called them an authority figure, because they are just one singular person that runs the server, and the other mods do that too. Which I mean, I also saw them like authority figures sorta too, saying that their story is very personal to them, along with the O thing, but it was actually original. And me saying this leaves a bad taste in their mouth since stuff like this had happened in the past. where people would take their story and wouldn't care about their consent, and were upset with the changes they made. Also saying that they understand the frustration of making an OC for something I put a lot of time into, that their story has no discernible law, and it's bound to change. I did ask if I could make my fanfictions and ours but keep it to myself, and their only response was just let the story be made first. Now I want to make it clear that I didn't feel that the story was mine. Like if I were to post about it online, I would always say, hey, I'm not the original creator. This person is. And I did tell Merlin this. Honestly, I'm just going to let anyone watching this make up their own minds to this, because my brain keeps bouncing between who the bad guy was in this situation. Because on one hand, the story is very personal and dear to them, but on the other hand, the universe that the story takes place in already had somewhat of a fan base, though incredibly small, because of the comic they had made, and people already had Ox for the story. Like, I don't know what to think. Like they will never live down the fame they once had, and will always have a big reach to me no matter how much they distance themselves from their past to me. Also, why should I not make my own private? Like it's private, and they're not going to see it. So why does it existing where they can't see it matter anyways? So like why care anyways? I did air other grievance like them not giving a heart emoji, which I know is pathetic, but it wasn't rooted in any sort of entitlement, mostly just paranoia and insecurity about whether they like me or not. I did make the decision to leave the server for the whole of October to improve myself. After I did this, I emailed Merlin since I would be emailing them more, and asked them about boundaries. They said to not expect them to reply to emails quickly since they have a job, and that their boundaries for their original story is to follow the canon universe, and if I don't want to follow the canon, I should just make a different OC. And headcanons. And that they don't want me to make an OC and put a lot of time into them, only for the canon to change and ruin the OC. And they said that their personal boundaries, like discarding their canon and rules, just to make a hybrid OC, seemed insulting to them. But they understood that I didn't mean to come off that way, but it's how it comes off to them. And that they are not threatened by it or anything. And as mentioned, they have had a lot of people try to steal their story, and that they spent years on the story, and they wanted respect for it. And also that respect goes both ways for them. Like if you don't respect them, they don't feel inclined to give respect back. And then they went on about how they have given me so many chances. Too many chances. Like instead of giving them breathing room, I just go out of my way to contact the mods, including Gwen, about my problems with them. And that I'm too obsessed and insecure about what I think about them. And they're glad I'm taking a break, as that's what they've tried to tell me that this whole time. And that they hope my next therapy goes well, and that I can return to the server less attached to them. Now during that month, I don't know if I tried to get better. I did go to my therapy sessions, which were nice. But I kept missing the server a lot and just wanted to be back. Think I might have been angry at Merlin because I feel like I was missing out, but I can't remember much. I do feel like I wasn't treating one mod from that server, who I'll just call Scarlet, the best at times. Like, I think I can remember me asking them if they ever told Merlin about our conversations. Their response is that it is not healthy to think about Merlin all the time. I also was still online and stuff, especially when it came to talking to one, as I think at this point we had been having calls very often, and he was just a nice person to have. After my time was up, I asked Scarlet if I could have an invite link. They said sure, but to be respectful to Merlin, because it was one kicked or something, which I thought was strange, because I thought I left on my own free will, and taking a break was my idea. Maybe it was my idea, or maybe it was me taking Merlin's suggestion. Probably the latter though. It did feel nice to be back, but I did feel a little bit salty, because there was some event during October where if you collected enough of some candy thing, and if you won, Merlin would give you free art. I felt upset about because I felt like I had missed out on something. And I remember them saying a long while ago that they would draw my OC and theirs once they got the energy to do so. But at the end of the day, I'm not entitled to their art and time, and they are a very busy person. So, I guess these feelings were unfounded. It's just that I don't get fan art very often, so I just felt upset that they didn't follow up on it. But again, I'm not entitled for them to make me something as they are very busy. But me being in that server wouldn't last long because of two very bad things I had done. I had posted over someone's vent about their relative dying in Vent Channel. My vent was about how I was upset that me going to Oklahoma was being postponed. It might sound like a dumb thing to vent about, but the thing is that I didn't have therapy appointments because I was supposed to be in Oklahoma. But the trip being postponed just made me feel crummy, especially on Wednesday, which are my therapy days. Basically, being in Oklahoma was supposed to make up for not being in therapy, if you get what I'm trying to say. It was still a crappy thing to do, because their relative just died, and it just came off as me treating something so mundane as more important as a relative dying. And the other bad thing I did was join a VC with some ex-mutuals who don't like me. I joined the VC very impulsively, like I had just woken up. I didn't think it would matter because I had done it before and nothing happened. I admit sometimes my motives for joining the VC can vary from just being curious and missing them, or just being angry they left me and feeling spiteful. I think this time it was motivated by just wondering what was up and being impulsive. But still, considering the being angry motive, I guess the ban was justified. But my reaction to it was pure devastation. Like, I had an emotional breakdown, cried a lot in my room, and I even relapsed in self-harm. It might seem pathetic and like an overreaction, but I felt like a complete failure, and things would never get better. That I would always be a creepy loser that no one liked and made people uncomfortable. And it didn't help that I wouldn't be seeing my therapist for a while. But through it all, Juan was there for me, saying that the ban was an abuse of power, mentioning the VC thing, and said they had banned him too because of him posting an NSFW YouTube link with an underage Gumball character, and said that the server was way too sensitive, which, looking back on, I should have gotten away from him sooner, maybe. I did email Merlin about being banned, apologizing for what I did and explaining my actions and asking whether I'm still allowed to watch their streams and like their Instagram posts. The time without a response felt long and filled with dread. But they eventually responded saying that I'm still allowed to watch streams and look at their Instagram, but the server was a grey area. And honestly, this relieved me a lot and helped calm me down and get me back on track. I did also reply thanking them for the response and asking if my ex-mutuals were ever made aware of the miscommunication. And I don't know if Merlin ever did tell them. I wonder about it at times. Now, some months later, I did have doubts about our friendship in January of 2024 because of the Yanda simulator drama going on. Like, I wondered if our friendship was wrong. And one of the response videos to Yanda Dev's video, the part where Alex says he's not a groomer because he didn't fit the definition of a groomer, and the guy's response to it was something like, well, the definition of grooming and groomer are kinda open-ended. And whether or not it was his intention, he's still a weirdo. I did talk about this with Juan, and he did suggest not being friends, maybe. I was too attached to him to let him go. Later, in late February of 2024, I was on my computer talking with Juan, and prior to this he said he was going to punish me for talking about Sonichu. And so in our call he turned on his camera and showed me his genitals. I was completely shocked but not like traumatized. I was like, dude, this is like so illegal, you could go to jail. In that moment I did leave the call just to process what had just happened. And I started to worry about our friendship. And a few days after it happened, he confessed he was in love with me. And him flashing me was him just struggling with his feelings. I also unfortunately lost 2 friends around this time. One was just an Instagram friend, and they just blocked me one day. Like, I don't know why, like the last thing I sent them was some Sonic video, and boom, they blocked me. And a friend in Italy, she told me that we had nothing in common, and she didn't see the point in being friends with me anymore. I was incredibly devastated by this. I tried to get them back, like trying to message me while we were still Discord friends. But once they unfriended me, I tried to get them back via Tumblr. But they ended up blocking me there and on Twitter. And I even tried to make an alt account on Tumblr just to get them back. Got blocked there too. This might seem a little bit morally dubious, but my therapist did say it was okay. And she told me to do what I thought was best for me. But I could also be misinterpreting what she was saying. I do feel like this was the first time I harassed someone. There's gonna be a second time coming later. But I still deeply want to rekindle that friendship with that person. Like I would move heaven and earth to get her back. It genuinely feels like the world is ending when someone ditches me. And it's traumatic for me a lot of the time. Also, Merlin blocked me on Instagram. Now at the time I thought it was because I was under 18, as they decided they wanted to make more adult content. And I thought I could follow them again in June when I would turn 18. This will come up later as it coincides with the second time I harassed someone. Now Juan did suggest trying some things, like maybe not talking sexually and not saying I love you, but kept doing that. I feel bad about it, sometimes feeling like, did I cross his boundaries or something? But eventually, we did come to the agreement that we would date as soon as my 18th birthday came. I did tell my therapist about Juan, and she let me tell my mom on my own terms. I did tell my mom and dad eventually about what happened, and they told me to block and leave him. But I was already so attached to Juan, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Like, as I've said, we would have calls every day. He was just so important to me. It did also take a while for me to tell my friends because Juan didn't want it getting out. And if I did tell anyone, he would leave me, fearing it could end him up in jail. But he did eventually let me tell my friends if I showed him my boobs. Now I didn't want to do that because I was still 17, and I knew it was probably wrong and illegal. But I just tightened my shirt around my boobs, and it was good enough for him. I feel like this was one of the most morally wrong things Juan did to me. But I don't know if it was illegal since the age of consent in my state is 17 and 16 in his state. Now my feelings about what Juan did would shift. At times I didn't care, and only worried about our friendship, but other times I would feel a little bit icky about what he did. But I only felt it in small amounts at the time, so it didn't feel like a reason to leave him. Also, Merlin's streaming group disbanded, and their Discord server closed. I got mixed feelings because on one hand it felt like a chapter was over, but on the other hand disappointment because part of me wanted to go back to the server, but it probably wouldn't have happened. Eventually, the few days leading up to my birthday, I felt nervous and exited. Like I was nervous to date Juan because he would be like my first real boyfriend, and he had done morally dubious things. But on the other hand, I did feel exited to date him at times and to follow Merlin again. Then once the clock hit midnight, and it was my birthday, he asked to see my boobs and asked me to date him. And I agreed and did these things. But I was also trying to contact Merlin. I talked with a friend of theirs, who I will call Squid, to ask them. Took a while for him to get the answer from them, but he did eventually tell me that Merlin wasn't going to unblock me. He said something like, they wanted to keep the circles tight or something. Now this is where I started to have a downward spiral, because none of it made sense to me. If they wanted to have a tight circle, why was their Instagram still public and not private? And I wasn't blocked on their toy house, and I was even still verified, and they would still allow me to comment on their webcomic kit. Just wasn't adding up. And it drove me crazy for about 3 months, I think. This was one of the things that made one break up with me. The other one was that I was talking to his other friend more and would say, I love you to him, and call him handsome platonically. Another time I question if I did something bad. Did I overstep their boundaries? Even if it was platonically, but he interpreted these things as me cheating on him and just sidelining him. But after his friend unfriended and I got him back afterwards, I never said I love you or called him handsome again. Now I'm gonna take a break from the downward spiral thing to talk about his kinda racist humor. Now I'm not sure if he was just edgy or genuinely racist, but he would always joke and talk about black people and the Chinese, like about how black people are thugs and how the Chinese stole the Philippine Sea. And I decided to try making racist jokes about Filipinos to get back at him. I would call him typical Asian slurs like the CC slur and C ink, but I would also call him Filipino slurs like flip, which was ironic because he was taller than me. And I made up a slur for him like, you Ben word. He was proud of me for that one. The anti-Chinese stuff would turn ironic when he found out he was part Chinese. But I think I was sometimes racist about black people, like just saying the N-word, but I can't remember too much of it, but I'm pretty sure I did. I do feel bad about this at times, but I was kind of groomed into, so I give myself grace, I guess. But I apologize to anyone who is offended by this language, especially if you are a person of color. Now back to things not adding up to me and the confusion. So I kept asking Squid about Merlin, but I wanted to hear Merlin's reasons for having me blocked from them. I tried emailing them, no response. I tried commenting on their webcomic and trying to message them on the webcomic website, no response. And I asked my therapist if I should try contacting them over Tumblr, and they said it was okay if it's what I think is best for me. I tried contacting them via @ing them, but they blocked me on Tumblr. But this is where it gets confusing, because when they updated their webcomic, and I commented something unrelated to me being blocked, they approved my comment, and even replied to a question about what the poster in the comic was. I even tried to art Gwen, but that didn't work either. It was so confusing and mind-boggling to me, and I really wanted to resolve these issues because I miss seeing their art, and wanted to get back to dating Juan because I thought if I resolved, or at least got the answer as to why I'm blocked, I thought I could get back with Juan because I wouldn't be stressing about Merlin. It was bad for me mentally. I felt so confused and abandoned and hurt. I would cry constantly. It didn't help that I was out of town and was in my dad's apartment, where my mom could just barge in, and I had to keep quiet as to not disturb anyone. It might seem pathetic, but it was rooted in the feeling that I did something bad, and I didn't know what it was. I just wanted to either get the answers from them or follow them on Instagram again. And I tried asking Squid about these things, and he didn't have the answers, telling me to leave them be, and that this wasn't healthy for me, that this was parasocial. The best he knew is that Merlin didn't want to be friends or interact, and he did want me to stop asking about Merlin. Now, once my downward spiral was over, I did make plans to get therapy sessions to be on good terms with Merlin once more and to hopefully get back with Juan, or maybe get away from him comfortably, but honestly, I don't know if I got better because I was still thinking about them quite a bit, and would get angry about them, thinking it was their fault. And my ex-mutuals were at fault for putting me in the position to get groomed. But obviously they couldn't have predicted that this would happen to me. I do try to give myself grace for my actions towards Merlin, because a lot of the time I wasn't in town while I was bugging them. When I did have my therapist when I decided to art Merlin on Tumblr, but that was early on in my harassment towards them. I have spoken to my therapist about what I did, and she doesn't consider what I did harassment, because I wasn't trying to hurt them. I just wanted a resolution and closure, and to stop feeling so awful. I don't know what to feel about this. I always questioned of what Juan did counted as grooming. I knew that what he did was wrong, but didn't know if it was grooming. But when the Cinnabar 03 drama was going on, and everyone was making rants, and a point that resonated with me is when Cinny said they didn't purposely isolate the victim, like in the definition of grooming. People's response to that was that her victim was already isolated, so Cinny was still a groomer by her definition. That oddly resonated with me because Juan didn't purposely isolate me. I was isolated because of all the bad things I did. To know that he would probably still be considered a groomer because he took advantage of me when I was vulnerable. I ended up in a VC in server for the former Cinnabar 03 server members, and we were talking about Cinny and grooming, I brought up that I was still friends with Juan, even though he flashed me. And one person told me that he was a groomer and told me that they related to me because of their experience with their groomer. Now, as of recent, I left a comment on Merlin's comic, joking and also feeling weirdly concerned that they committed a war crime because they had a red cross on a first aid kit, since it violated the Geneva Conventions. Now I know in my heart that I was just making a joke, as I've seen so many memes and jokes about war crimes everywhere. Like, here are some examples. But Merlin didn't take it that way and thought I was threatening them. They emailed me about it, but it took me a while to actually read it because I was so nervous. But I thought it couldn't be that bad since I was still verified on Toy House. So the day after the election, and it was my therapy appointment, I actually read what they had said to me. They told me to stop commenting on their posts and trying to get a hold of them through friends. Telling me they tried to be my friend, but I was too obsessive, that I refused to get help. Which is only like half true because I think I wasn't paying attention to my therapist, or I was out of state and couldn't get therapy, so had mental issues. And they even considered getting a lawyer and told me to leave them alone. Now I know what I meant, as I said, but I feel like I stirred up these feelings of paranoia in Merlin, with me trying to contact them so much. After they said this, I had an emotional breakdown. I cried because I felt like I was a failure, like it had been a year with no improvements, and it felt like I could never leave Juan because I knew that this would bring me close to him. Thankfully, my therapist was there to comfort me, saying I needed to detach from Merlin and move on. I cried about it all the way to the parking lot. I was mumbling to myself and I said sexual assault, and my mom wondered why I said that. And when we got to the car, I told her about how I didn't cut off Juan, that I was talking to him in secret, that I would show him my boobs. When she heard this, she was incredibly upset to know that Juan was doing this. She told me to block him immediately. It took me a while to actually block him. Like, I blocked then unblocked him on Discord, because I actually wanted to say goodbye to him. Eventually, a day later, we had a call on WhatsApp and talked a bit. Then I showed him my boobs, then blocked him on Discord. And I thought, WhatsApp. So as of right now, I only have contact with him on Steam, as we are still friends there. And WhatsApp, which is weird, because I thought I had blocked him there. But maybe I didn't, or maybe there's a glitch. It was a shock when he messaged me there. We had a little chat and he told me that he bought 2 commissions in different art styles with my character and one of Merlin's characters. I was both happy and nervous. Happy to see 2 characters I adored drawn in a better art style than mine, but nervous because I wasn't supposed to be talking to him, and it made me worry that I could never leave him because I could never turn down such a nice gift. Now I will go over the 4 times, possibly 5 times, he's flashed me without my consent. The first time was what I talked about much earlier, and when I was a minor. The 2 other times he showed his boner through his underwear, and the 4th time was when he was jerking it. At first I couldn't tell if he was jerking or if he was scratching his belly, but he confirmed he was jerking it. Now I don't know if I should count this, but one time he had his camera on and was jerking it, he claimed. He didn't know that he had his camera on. But when I told my therapist, she doubted it and had me not FaceTime him for a week. And when I told people in that VC I mentioned earlier, they told me to get away from him. As of right now, my relationship with Juan is uncertain. Like, I feel like the gift he got me, like that would make it difficult to leave. If my mom finds out, she might take away my internet entirely, and that would just be awful. And sorry if this sounds off topic, but the OC that I made for Merlin's O also feels uncertain. Like, I'm still working on her story, as it means a lot to me. I don't know if I could truly give up working on it. It feels kinda bad because like Merlin has had the O since they were 9 years old, and it feels like I'm just ruining it. So, I might just consider working on the story in private and keeping it to myself. Though I do have a superhero type original universe that I could work on, where like a magical girl goes on a killing spree killing all the villains. And she lives in a world like The Boys, except there are two superheroes companies based on Marvel and DC. But I still don't know if I'm willing to give up on the other Ox story. Because again, it means a lot to me. Especially the relationship she has with one of Merlin's characters is incredibly important and comforting to me. Anyways, I decided for there to be some proof of this, but I only got a few screenshots, so here you go. Anyways, that's all. I guess my takeaway is that you should treat people better, or you might end up like me or something. Might seem kinda toxic, but whenever I look at my past, it just seems I made bad decisions that put me in this position.